Now it's okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for having me, and apologies for not being able to come. I had personal businesses which unfortunately made it unable for me to come to Brussels. But it is a pleasure to tell you more about the issue of policy coherence through living labs, with the example of FIT4FOOD2030, a project that ran until 2 years ago, but has a very interesting legacy, especially I think for this conference, for this meeting. First of all, we are having, and undoubtedly you may have talked about this before, but the unsustainability of many of our current systems, and the food system is one of them. We have loads of problems that are pressing us to think about the food system as unsustainable: environmental pollution, greenhouse gas emissions resulting in climate change, loss of biodiversity, water scarcity, animal welfare, overweight, obesity, low incomes of farmers and workers. And but of course we often tend to focus on the challenges and the downsides, but it is very important to also look at a food system doesn't come about for nothing. It has come about because it does something very good. And the good thing that it does is that after the Second World War, it has given us high quantities of food at low cost. So the idea of feeding the world, end of hunger, has been in all policies around the world of nation states, of supranational organizations, global. All of the energies were on trying to achieve this. And a lot of research and innovation went into that, leading to this intensive large-scale agriculture with high-yielding varieties and breeds and chemical inputs. At the same time, we also saw specialization, and this was critical for further making things more efficient. So further efficiency was supported by this specialization between sectors and between levels. Also, this linearity of the supply chain with the consumer at the end was a way of really getting things fast through the supply chain. At the same time, when you see when systems become more efficient, you see increasing power concentration. So some of the actors are quite able to reap the resources from the system. And that creates then inequality in the system. And you see that in most of the systems, social systems happening. So we see that values like affordability and competitiveness are very well catered by the current food system, but that others like inclusiveness, diversity, health, and overall sustainability are much less catered for. So therefore, we need to change the system is increasingly thought. Not surprisingly, we think of research and innovation, again, as one way to catalyze this food system transformation. However, although there are examples where some of the innovations have found their way into society relatively smoothly, often there are problems. We see, first of all, that there are often low rates and levels of adoption, slow or no scaling up of some of these interesting initiatives because they are not embedded in existing structures, and we see unforeseen side effects. And in many cases, this simply is that we hardly see any effect, that there's an overestimation of what they think a certain innovation will do to, for example, health or environmental pollution. And that makes you wonder about the research and innovation as a catalyst. What's going on? And the interesting thing is that just like we saw this linear approach in the food system as a whole, we see this linear approach in research and innovation as well. So we see that we tend to solve problems by breaking the system down in solvable sub-problems, and we do it in sequence. So we have this food system challenges, and we cut it up in small pieces, like an obesity problem where we say people have to make healthier choices. So we have to give people more information. And then this information package is handed over to society, but somebody else is working on more sustainable food production. And we see this siloing between the different problems, and which leads to lack of coherence. And another way, there is another divide, and that's between, on the one hand, where solutions are being tried and where they need to be implemented. And that leads to another problem, and that's the implementation gap. So actually the way we're doing our research at the moment is not working. So instead of looking at this food system as this linear supply chain, as we do it with researchers also in a very linear way, we should not only think about it as a circle, we should actually think about it as a highly complex system where we have lots of interactions, where we have factors, actors, organization, and interactions. So we see in such a system a lot of feedback loops, feed forward, feedback in a way that we cannot easily predict. And also at the same time, there are trade-offs. So where one thing in a system might do something good, it does something much worse in another. What can be good for health doesn't necessarily have to be good for sustainability. So, and the other way around. And at the same time, we want to look for synergies, because that will actually catalyze food system transformation. So the first thing that I want to give as a message is that it's very important for food system transformation, for research and innovation, to take a systems approach, to look at the system as a whole, with recognizing the interactions between the various parts and not actually looking at a very small part and only and making it and fragmenting it. But that is realizing at the same time that such a systems approach is markedly different from what we have done today. So it requires a quite drastic change in the way we conduct our research. But it can bring strong benefits, because it really does help us to understand how systems behave and how we may anticipate and how we may influence that dynamics. And for interventions to be successful, it is thus critical to include these different aspects and actors, so that we can actually design the ones that are better able to fulfill this role as a catalyst. Now, that means that food systems and addressing the persistent problem in it, R&I, becomes holistically and a joint endeavor. So because what I said, the systems approach means not only all these different factors, it also means actors and organizations. So that means in the research and innovation process, if you take a systems approach, it means including all the different actors as well. So it is actually making this whole of this, so not partly separately considering implementation and policy. You bring the actors in the implementation and policy context into your research and innovation process, so that actually science and practice really join hands. Now, what we did because now I'm coming to FIT4FOOD2030, was taking this as a starting point. And we identified clearly the problems. So the problems that we said we need to address in the project are, first of all, this fragmented R&I landscape across disciplines, across sectors, over levels. We see currently a low involvement of citizens and civil society organizations and users, both in overall thinking about food system transformation as well as in research and innovation. We see relatively low private sector investments currently in the R&I on food system transformation, and if money is available, it's often through the national research systems. We see that programs often operate as open calls. So actually bottom up from the research, not prescribing the type of research, the type of priorities that are there. And secondly, there are, not last but least, in those national research systems with their open calls, there is very little support for inter and transdisciplinary research. At least this was the case in 2017 when we started the projects. Things have, however, slightly improved, but this was what we were facing with. So it meant that if you want to do this, this is far from business as usual. That means that we are up against a lot of resistance. So we said it's not something that you simply change policies. It's not going to happen because everything is so differently organized. So we need on various level systems information, and we wanted to understand a bit more this resistance. And looking at some of the social theories on change and on system change provides some pointers of the sort of theory of change that you could pursue. First of all, this is the duality of structure from the structuration theory of Giddens. The fact that we build systems. We build systems because we want to be effective, and next we want to be efficient. People don't want to spend too much time, energy, resources to, once you have something done effectively, to do it as simple as possible. So as agents, we try to develop structures, and these structures then prescribe behavior. And to such an extent that at one point as agents, we don't even realize anymore why we are doing things. So it becomes routine. So many of the obstacles to change are the routines that are there. But apart from the routines, we shouldn't forget that we also have set all sorts of structures, like rules and regulations, subsidies. So there's also another structural element apart from the routinizing things. It's these infrastructures that we have put in place, and in the end, it's our mindsets. So we have mindsets, mental models that also function in that whole. So that gives a system a lot of stability, but at the same time makes it difficult for change. So we have sort of a kind of regime, a very stable regime of a culture, structure, and practice, our routinized practices, set in mindsets by all sorts of rules and regulations and infrastructures that are relatively solidified. However, landscape trends may interfere. So like the growing climate change may act as a landscape trend that develops, which puts pressure on the regime. So many of the developments that we see now put pressure on that regime for change. At the same time, we see lots of actors that try to create alternative practices. Although we see that they often remain very much small and don't scale up. If they would grow, they could put pressure on the regime. So we also have there a bottom-up pressure. And then, of course, we have an increasing unsatisfaction, growing unsatisfaction within a regime of the regime players that can also create resistance there. So it is these barriers that hinder transition and these drivers from the landscape and from the niche and some of the developments within the regime that we need to put a handle on and make productive. So where do we start? So this is just a summary. The resistance was our take, and then we said we need to create spaces for transformation that bring together a variety of stakeholders interested in research and innovation and food system transformation, and that could work well by setting up these niche developments. So creating multiple multi-level situated living labs for experimentation to try to strengthen the niche push. And we focused the developments in the labs on integrated policies, particularly R&I policies, and the development of competencies, because we said also, well, people are in certain routines. They simply don't have the competencies to do research in a different way or to think about food system transformation, and R&I policies is another way. That led to this structure. We said we want more policy coherence and alignment. We want that in from a systems approach with the involvement of a wide variety of stakeholders from research, policy, business, and civil society, and develop the competencies while at the same time linking the local, national, and EU levels. And we did that by setting up national level policy labs, in total 11, 14 city labs at city level, and we had an overarching think tank that was also trying to connect these developments at local and national level with the EU level. We built it on a lot of mapping exercises on trans policy showcases breakthroughs. We developed methods and tools for the living labs and provided training and support to run these living labs. So we built a toolkit for transformation, and here we see, which I'm most interested in for the presentation for today, is this one. I would like to run a food lab or a living lab, and a living lab is a policy lab. What do I do? And at the same time, we also built, put our experience into a booklet, which was about operationalizing FIT4FOOD2030 through living labs. And here I focus specifically on the activities on the policy lab, because I think they were most comprehensive and may provide some interesting pointers for the future. A policy lab we defined it as a participatory experimental space, and it was structured to bring actors together. And we wanted the outcome would be aligning and innovative policies. And so we wanted to have an integration across departments and agencies at different levels. So both horizontal and vertical policy coherence. And we invited nation states to come with a proposition to become a policy lab, and they could apply, but it should be at least a collaboration of at least 2 ministries, and they should really commit to it and should make staff available. Staff was not funded through the project. They had to make staff available themselves. And as a project, we would provide support for a series of interrelated participatory meetings with dedicated themes, methods, etc. We would provide a phase model, so methods, here 4 phases, and we would provide training and learning. So the ones that were going to run these policy labs would receive this training and learning together. So we started off with 7 policy labs, and they regularly met and discussed their activities. We gave them quite a lot of trainings in the sense of hands-on experience on how to set up certain workshops, but also the difficulties they faced, the challenges. So they would really come together. When they were actually running their experiments, they would meet on a monthly basis. Now, I briefly like to touch upon the method that we did. So phase 1 was about system awareness and analysis, and it would start with this, getting an idea of this food system together with stakeholders. So there was immediately stakeholder analysis and networking with stakeholders from the quadruple helix, so from academia, civil society, industry, and government, in an inclusive way. And they would also map the current activities in this place, like current research agendas, programs, regulations on food system transformation, and especially on the R&I, research and innovation, going on. The second phase was visioning and pathway development. So visioning was about what sort of future do we want from the food system? Again, together with the stakeholders, they would think about what would we like the future to look like, the food system to look like in 2050. And how could research contribute to that? So what are the leverage points? But also, what are the barriers and opportunities? And that would lead to what we call this pathway development through backcasting. And then making the roadmap. So pathways would be from the vision to the here and now, and then taking the steps, building a roadmap. Next, of course, it would be the experimentation and innovation. It goes from thinking to action, construct and deconstruct, because it's not only about building, but also in a food system transformation, it's about thinking about what we want to break down. And then co-create the experiments towards transformation and co-learning. And also here, it's about what will be the network around it. And of course, it's also about learning from it. What is the impact? What lessons can we learn from it? So it's about setting up monitoring and evaluation frameworks, again, in a co-creation process, because whose values are being taken into account when looking at impact? And balance between qualitative and quantitative, not only quantitative, but also very much how can we learn from it to improve our design? And the continuation of the living lab. Now, the labs that functioned for the longest period of time had very interesting outcomes. New programs were developed, lots of interactions with stakeholders. So we could really say that this was successful. At the same time, we have to agree that there were some hiccups as well. So we also identified challenges. Challenges were on power dynamics. So realizing not tokenistic, but genuine involvement, not sidelining the inputs of the less powerful groups. There was the competencies needed to be built, and dealing with conflict was also an issue that featured. Another thing was it's not so easy to measure impact of in such a complex system situation. So what is a good impact? It was a lot of discussions to deal with this plurality, and there is such a demand for quantifiable outcomes that there is this inclination to measure even when it's not really valuable. And but learning from each other was also critical and difficult, because it's so situational, it's so place-based. So how can you translate the learning from one context to another? Last but not least, I would like to put on the projectification issue, that actually we are so used to working in the project mindset that actually this creative learning, reflexivity, adaptive design, emergent is often doesn't sit so well with this projectification. So thinking about much more flexible ways, and it tends to narrow down things. So thinking about much more flexible frameworks is incredibly important, also from these funding programs, agencies. So not put everything in and start again compartmentalizing by making health a separate one from agriculture. It all needs to be together. But we saw that creeping in again as well. Now, the legacy, there are 2 projects that are currently working with it. FoodClick is really following up on this legacy of Fit for Food 2030, using this living lab construct to create science policy practice interfaces and food policy through developing integrated food policies through these living labs. And another one which I would really like to bring forward is Clever Food, which could actually be seen as the successor of Fit for Food 2030 formally. They're now setting up a Food 2030 online platform, bringing together all the projects that are working on food system transformation and setting up a connected lab network of food labs. of food and policy labs and innovation labs that are increasingly being used in all different projects. And of course, the project network that came out of Fit for Food 2030, that was the Sustainable Food Systems Network, has now been adopted by Clever Food. And this is what I would like to give to you. Thank you very much.